Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for our book marketing Q&A session. I hope you came prepared to ask a bunch of questions to Becky today. My name is Aubrey and I'm joining you from our headquarters in Lambertville, Michigan, as Becky is also. Before we begin the webinar today, I'd like to share a couple of technical considerations with you. This webinar is a 30-minute webinar, which we are recording for you to review later or share with friends or colleagues as you see fit. Please take a moment to find the question panel within the GoToWebinar platform. That is where you'll be able to answer your questions all throughout the webinar today. We're looking forward to having tons of questions and tons of participation today. So don't be shy, just go ahead and enter your questions in the question panel, and we'll go through those with Becky as we go along. And if you are on Twitter today, you can join us in the conversation using the hashtag bookmarketing. Or you can interact with Becky on Twitter at her Twitter handle, Becky Robinson, RBNSN. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Becky. Today, Becky is the founder and CEO of Weaving Influence, and she has led our team in successfully launching over 90 books. Becky is a wife, mother of 3, and an avid runner. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Aubrey, on the other side of the wall. It's good to be with you today. I know that we're going to wait for some folks to put in some questions, but we had a few prepared that people ask us often, right?
Yes, we do. So I'll just go ahead and get started. The first question we have is, when is the best time to start marketing my book?
Well, this is a really easy question, Aubrey. The best time to start marketing the book, or the best time to plan for the marketing of your book, is before you even write the book. So if you've participated with us on previous webinars, and I know since you're a member of the team, you already know this, Aubrey, but we envision the book marketing cycle in 4 phases. And the first one is building. Well, it's never too early to start building. Politics aside, I was exceedingly impressed by Hillary Clinton and an interview I saw with her many years before she started her campaign for the presidency. And she was talking about how she was traveling from city to city, and she was building groups of people who were committed to her and her causes. And she had really focused on, we have to keep on adding people in each location. And so if you're thinking about someday marketing a book, when you start to have that dream to write the book, you really should be thinking in terms of, how can I begin to build an audience of fans and followers who are going to be excited to read my book when it comes out. So the best day to start marketing your book is today, even if your book isn't coming out for months, and even better is if you had started years ago. I have a secret or not so secret dream someday to publish my own book, and I view all the work that I've done in building my businesses since 2009 to all be adding up as I approach that eventual book marketing that I hope to do someday.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, because sometimes I think people think of the marketing as an afterthought. So a lot of people think, oh, well, I can just start marketing the book as soon as it comes out, or, as it's like very closely approaching to be coming out. And instead, it's more likely that we should think of it, like you're saying, months or even years in preparation for the book coming out. So
exactly.
I think that's a good thing to know.
Think about the most exciting blockbuster movies, right? So, how far in advance are you going to know that the new Star Wars movie is coming out? And, you'll get that kind of advanced preview. And if you're an avid fan, and if you're like my kids, like, Mom, this movie is coming out in August of 2018, can we go? And think about the excitement that builds, and eventually it's going to be a blockbuster hit because people have that anticipation. Now, books are maybe not as exciting as those blockbuster movies, but you can similarly build anticipation for what you hope to share. And you can use all the time leading up to the book's release as a way of sharing content that comes from the book to get people excited about eventually being able to read the book. More practically speaking, if there are people on the call who are planning for the release of their books, when folks come to me and they say, well, how soon should we hire a marketing agency? When should my campaign begin? In that case, I typically will tell authors that if they're close to approaching the marketing of their book, we love a 4-month ramp up. Even better is to have about 5 months prior to a launch. You know, sometimes authors will come to us and the launch is a month away. It's really difficult to get all the pieces in place with only a month remaining. But, you know, anything that you can do is better than nothing, and you want to make the most of the time you have. But typically for a traditional book launch, book marketing campaign, we'll want to start 4 to 5 months in advance. So actually just this morning, Aubrey, I was speaking to an author and her publication date is May 8th. And the advice that I gave her is, you know, if you're going to work with us and it's going to be a 6-month campaign, we should start in December. Or, you know, if it's only going to be 4 months, we could start, you know, in January or February. The other thing to note is that you can also kind of divide your thinking as it relates to kind of thought leadership building and influence building. That's something, as I mentioned, that can begin years in advance, and oftentimes we'll work with someone in advance of that 4 to 6 month window because maybe they don't have well-established social platforms. Maybe they've never placed articles and interviews on the web somewhere, and the sooner we can begin to work with them, the better. Or, you know, we even have authors come to us after the book's already out. So we have a proposal out with a guy, and his book came out in July, and he knows that, you know, marketing his book and building awareness is going to be a 2-year proposition. And so the book came out in July, it's October, there's still a lot we can do.
Right. And back to one of the points that you were just saying, like I was thinking, you know, a lot of times we talk about building those relationships and getting people to get excited about your book and getting people to like kind of join your team who are going to be, you know, an advocate for your book. And those can take a long time to build those relationships. So it's, I mean, those are the kinds of things you want to get started early on, right? As you approach, you know, your book launch.
Certainly. When it comes to building new relationships, it's really helpful to be able to add value in the world before you're looking for any return, before you're asking someone for something. I think there's nothing more transparent than, hey, I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn, and then in the very next message, I'm going to say, can I send you a copy of my new book? What you want instead is to be able to cultivate a real reciprocal relationship in which, at that point, it's only natural to ask someone to consider reviewing your book. And really, you want to take that expectation of help out of the equation when you're building relationships, if at all possible.
Right, absolutely. All right. So the next question we have is, how do I let my network know that I have a book coming out in a way that will excite them? So we were kind of just talking about this, but in your experience, what are kind of the best ways to get people revved up about the launch of a book?
Sure. Well, it really depends on who the target audience for the book is. Probably most of the people on the call know that our expertise is around business books. And so I'll answer with business books in mind, Aubrey. So there are a lot of different approaches to this, and one of the kind of resistance factors I hear from people is, well, you know, I'm not really comfortable with self-promotion, you know, I don't want to be going out all the time and saying, hey, you know, look at me, I have a book. And I think that the piece that we're sometimes missing is that when you're promoting a book, it's really not about promoting yourself, it's about promoting a message. And so there are potentially 2 reasons why people in your network would care about your book. Either the message is something that's exceedingly meaningful to or helpful or valuable to them, or they just care about you as a person. So let's take, for example, those people in your network who care about your book because they care about you as a person. For those people, they're really going to want to get an inside glimpse as to what it's like for you as an author. You know, they're going to want to hear about the journey. You know, did you just sign a contract with your agent? Did you just get the first preview of the cover? You know, are you working on edits? So oftentimes, if an author can genuinely and authentically share what their journey as an author is like, those people who care about your book because they care about you as an author are really going to soak up that information. They're really going to enjoy the journey. They're living vicariously with and through your adventure. So I mean, these could be people like your mom, right? Or, you know, your brother. But it could also be people in your network, and you have no idea how the work that you're doing in the world can and will inspire them. So as much as you're comfortable sharing kind of that insider view of what is it really like to traditionally publish a book? What is it really like to walk through the steps of self-publishing a book? What are the challenges that you're facing along the way? Any sharing of that is one helpful way to build excitement before your book is released. So that's for the people who care about you as a person. Then there's this larger bucket of people who might care about your message. And the best way to build excitement with them is to begin to share parts of the message with them. You know, I'm working on a book, and here's some thoughts I've been working through. You know, quite often authors who are self-publishing can gain a lot of really great early insight into what their audience wants and needs by blogging parts of what their book will become. And as you start to put those blog posts out into the world and you get people's feedback, you can even say, hey, you know, I'm working on a book and the core idea is X, and, you know, here are 3 questions I'm wrestling with. And so then those people who are predisposed to be interested in the topic of your book will really be able to respond to that kind of content that you're sharing in the world. So those are 2 ways that you can build early excitement. One is, again, for those people who might be really invested in you as a person. The other is those people who are interested in the message. And the core thing to remember is book promotion, book marketing doesn't need to be about you, particularly if you're uncomfortable with that. It really needs to be focused on this bigger vision of a message. And the thing I hear more often than anything else when I talk to authors, I'll ask, hey, what's your goal for your book marketing? And you know, I will hear a lot of things, but the thing that I always hear is, I believe this message has the opportunity to make a difference in the world. I want as many people as possible to find out about it. You know, I want to build awareness for this idea. I want people to adopt this idea. I want this idea to change the world. That's what I hear.
Yeah,
so in order
absolutely.
to do that, you have to overcome that resistance to promotion.
Right. And I think, of course, you know, they wouldn't have written the book or even invested in the marketing of the book if they didn't fully believe in the message that they were promoting. But I do like the point of saying, you know, I'm promoting a message instead of promoting myself, because I do think there are a lot of people who get nervous about doing self-promotion and like they don't want to be so public facing, and they maybe don't want to share like so much about themselves because it just seems like they're saying me instead of, you know, here's this great thing that I'm doing. And a lot of people don't want to be that way. So if people can change their mindset into thinking about, I'm promoting this message instead of promoting myself, I think it would be much more successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I hope those of you who are here or those of you who are watching the recording later will let that sink in. Definitely.
Here's a good one. If I have a small budget, what should I prioritize?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because quite often authors are overwhelmed by the investment required with publicity and marketing support. So for my money, if I had a small budget, I would focus on one key area at first, and that is establishing a center for people to find out about my book and its message, and that would be a website that I would own and that I would create that would showcase the book. And the second thing that I would spend, not necessarily money, but time on, is mobilizing my already existing network. So you really want to be thinking about, as you bring a book into the world, who are the key people that I have relationships with, and what are the ways that they can contribute to helping me build awareness for and sales of my book. And what I often advise clients to do is to invest the time needed to really identify those individuals and organizations who might be interested in the book. So if you're a business book author, it might be past clients of yours. It could be you know, organizations that you've served or individuals within those organizations. And most often, if you're thinking like with the spreadsheet in mind, you not only want to list out the organizations, but you do also want to list the individuals within those organizations. You want to really invest energy in thinking about, you know, who are the groups of people that my life touches on a regular basis. So you want to think about, you know, am I a member of any local organizations, maybe any community organizations, any civic organizations, any religious organizations, you know, and what are the organizations that I've been involved with in the past? So I'm working with an author right now, and she happens to live on an island off Seattle, and she's only lived there for a few years. And when we started to talk through, you know, who are the networks who can support your book launch, she immediately went to the place she lived before. She lived in Colorado, and she was connected to some women's groups and some moms groups, and her instinct was those are people who are really going to care about this book and could benefit from the book. And so you want to basically exhaust your imagination in brainstorming any possible groups of people or individuals who would be interested in your book. And then you want to get really clear about what you can do to ask them to help you in marketing your book. So it may be that, you know, the local chamber of commerce where you've spoken in the past could host an event for you, or it might be that you know a business owner, maybe a restaurant owner who might open up their restaurant for an event. You know, you really want to think creatively about the different people you know and the ways that they could help. So if I had a small budget, and if it's a small budget of money or a small budget of time, the two things that I'm recommending are have a clearly established center for your book marketing effort on your own website, and think about your networks and how you can effectively mobilize them. And the place where you might need kind of budget or money support on the network mobilization side is in establishing an email marketing list. Potentially you might need support on, you know, how to go about doing that, or actually implementing the sending of emails. And a personal assistant or admin can be really helpful in that process as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
One of the things I want to touch on also is, you know, you're talking about mobilizing your networks, like the people that are closest to you and who who will be an advocate for your book. And I know we deal with this a lot here in terms of like people wondering, now how do I go about asking for those things? And I already know your stance on this, but I feel like it would be helpful just to let everybody know, you know, kind of the best way to ask for things.
Well, can I throw it back to you today, Aubrey? What would you say is the best way to ask for things? You've had all kinds of wisdom on this call.
Yes. Well, I would say, I know what you would say, and I would have to agree with you, and it would be just a flat out, just ask. Don't beat around the bush. Just, you know, ask for what you want. You know, if you're asking people for help, just go ahead and ask. Say, please leave a review. Please pre-order the book. Please post this guest post for me. Please share on social media. And make it easy for them too. I know we've talked about that a lot in the past. Like in any email you send out, just always include the links and everything that they will need to make it easy for them just to go ahead and click and do exactly what they need to do. People tend to not really want to put a lot of work into that. If they're being asked to do something, they want it to be kind of quick and painless. So if we can make that possible, then that's best.
Yes, and I would just add one thing to that. I would also add that the more personal the ask, the more custom the ask, the more likely people are to say yes. So if you send out a mass email to 300 people, you're going to get a certain amount of participation. But if it's clear that you're sending an individual personal email, or heaven forbid, handwritten note, or even a phone call, you're going to get a much higher return on that investment of time. And I'll give you a good example. We're supporting an author right now, and she wrote a book about sustainability and wine, which is really outside, you know, what we normally do, as you know, Aubrey. And I happened to notice that this Facebook friend of mine posted that he has a wine newsletter. Well, I didn't know he had a wine newsletter. And so I sent him a note and I said, hey, would you consider, you know, reading and reviewing this book and putting it in your newsletter? And he said, sure, send me a copy. Here's my address. Well, then I wrote back and I said, you know, if you would also do an Amazon review, that would be amazing. Now, in the span of a week's time, he's already posted the most amazing Amazon review that's exceedingly thoughtful, that shows that he read the book, that he's interested in the topic. That one individual ask had a huge result. And it took me, you know, 5 minutes out of my day. It took me noticing that my friend was interested in wine. It took me, you know, assigning to our amazing shipping person to ship the book to him. I wrote a handwritten note to accompany the book, and in a week's time we had a great result. So you want to really think about, you know, how can I make it more personal? How can I be more in tune to people I can ask for things? This is a new idea for those of you who might be on the call. We have one client who's been doing a lot of her own outreach to media on behalf of the book that her father wrote. And she's using Instagram. So she's direct messaging people on Instagram with, you know, the offer of a copy of the book. She's sending the book, and through that effort, she's gotten a couple of articles on places like Huffington Post. So, and that, I think the reason that works so well is it's a personal ask. It's right from the daughter of the author. You know, it's through Instagram, which is very clearly a one-to-one communication channel. So just to kind of summarize, because I know I'm a little passionate about this, you know, a mass ask is of some value, but the individual personalized asks are much more effective. So as much as you can devote time to those, I would highly recommend that you do so.
Definitely. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's talk about blogging for a minute. That's like a topic that everybody always seems to want to know about. How often, ideally, should someone who's marketing their book be blogging?
Well, yes, this is a question we've had before. And a lot of it depends upon what that individual author can sustain. So while the ideal, in my opinion, is no less than one time per week, many authors can't sustain that level of content creation. So I would far rather have an author make a commitment to, I'm going to create one new piece of content per month, for example, and sustain that over a year's time, than to get really gung-ho and say, I'm going to blog 4 times a week, and then, crash and burn after only a week and a half. So ask yourself the question, what is a sustainable level of content creation? What can I make a commitment to and stick to over time? And then go with that. And again, as I said, if you're looking for my own kind of best practice guideline, and please don't go look at my domains and see how I'm measuring up, because I'm not, one time per week.
Well, and we talk about quality over quantity as well. So if like you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to blog 4 times a week, but the quality isn't there, I'm sure we would much rather have posts that have wonderful content that people are interested in, would like to share with others, rather than just blogging 4 times a month just for the heck of blogging.
Agreed, definitely.
Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, but I would also say don't overthink it. I think one of the places where people get trapped is they think that there has to be a certain level of quality that their blog post needs to be. Now, obviously, we want to pay attention to things like punctuation and grammar and sentence structure, and we want to write things that are readable and valuable. But I would encourage, authors to not get intimidated by the fact that they think, to write a good blog post is going to take 4 hours. A few years ago, I went through an exercise and I tried for a month every single day to see how much of a first draft I could finish in 12 minutes. And I would set my timer, and we can actually put the link to that blog post in our follow-up email. But I would set the timer for 12 minutes, and I would try to get a first draft of a blog post in 12 minutes. And I could pretty successfully nearly every time. So particularly if you've thought in advance about what you intend to write, I think with practice, it's reasonable to think that you can get a first draft in 15 minutes. Now, of course, you're going to need to go back and proofread it, and you're going to want to find links to add, and you might want to select a photo, and all those things can take more time. But with practice, I think that the pain of writing a blog post can get much less painful. And go ahead, tell me in the question panel if you think I'm crazy, but I promise I've done it.
No, I think that's a good exercise too, because I do think there's kind of this like paralysis around blogging that people maybe overthink it, or they're like, oh man, I don't have enough time to carve out to even write these blog posts. But like you're saying, if you have enough practice at it and you have thought about what, maybe some bullet points about what you want to say, then it can be relatively painless process.
Yes, exactly. And I think the other thing that we sometimes neglect, Aubrey, is that we can repurpose content. So likely in the process of writing your book, there are chapters that ended up on the editing floor, ones that you chose not to include, or, perhaps you have writing that you've done in the past. I know on weavinginfluence.com, we have an archive of thousands of blog posts, and we have new audiences today that we didn't have 4 years ago. And so being able to look back at, well, what did I write 4 years ago, and how could I gently edit it, put a new spin, add a new story, it's going to add value to our audience today. Probably they're not going to remember that they read it before if they did, or we're attracting new readers anyway. So think about, what did I write 5 years ago that I can bring to life again with a new approach, and then that also can cut down on the investment of time related to blogging.
Right, definitely. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So if anyone has any lingering questions, just be sure to add them in the question panel. But for now, this is a good one. How many advance copies of my book should I send, and to who?
Well, so that's a really big question, and it really depends upon what your bigger picture goals are. Um, but for a moment, let me just share that one of the key ideas I have about book marketing is that getting 50 reviews on Amazon is a really helpful benchmark for creating enough social proof about the value of your title, and then also opening up potentially to other promotion through Amazon's own book marketing kind of promotion. I think not all of us really, I mean, I've been in this business for 5, 6 years. I don't necessarily understand all the different ways Amazon's algorithms work, but what we hear is that getting 50 Amazon reviews really does help a title. So if I have a goal of getting 50 Amazon reviews, while some of them might be organic by someone just reading the book and choosing to review it, in most cases, every single one of those reviews is going to be hard won and is going to require that I ask someone to write that review or make a request of people I know who have read the book. So I've seen, authors, if they see someone tweeting about their title, they'll say, hey, if you enjoyed it, would you leave an Amazon review? More typically, the approach that we recommend is getting a certain number of advanced copies of your book into the hands of people, even in advance of your launch, so that they can read the book and add a review even during the first week or two that the book is out. So we've had a varying range of experience with this. We have one author who regularly sends out between 700 and 2,000 advanced copies of his books, and the number of Amazon reviews we've seen him achieve from that is between 150 and 200. And those come pretty quickly, but that's an extreme number of books to send out. Most people can't do that. What I would also say is that if you send 50 books, you might be likely in a short amount of time to have about 10% of those people who will write a review right away. So if you send out 50, you might get 5. If you send, if it's a very engaged group or if you're very focused with the ask, you might get 10. You're not going to get all 50. So you want to judge the number of advanced copies that you're going to give away against, how many reviews you'd like to achieve. So I do see another question that just popped in that we might have time to answer. How many books actually make it to the New York Times bestseller list, and is it now necessary since so many people look at Amazon reviews? Well, I think that the New York Times list has tremendous value as it relates to additional exposure for a book. For most authors, it's not an achievable goal. Particularly for business books, the threshold of the number of individual copies you have to sell in a week to make the list is exceedingly high, and the New York Times list is curated. Most often the books that you're going to see on the New York Times bestseller list for nonfiction are celebrity authors or people who have an amazing and vast platform before they release the book. So as an experiment, go ahead and Google the New York Times list for nonfiction and see the type of titles that show up there. I think it's less than 1% of all books will ever make that achievement. So whether it's necessary or not, I think is less relevant. What's more relevant is it a worthwhile goal to pursue? We can, if you'd like, include a link to a New York Times an article about the New York Times list written by a guy named Tim Grahl, and he has some really great insights into the list and how it works and whether you should try to reach it and if you can reach it, and we'd be happy to include that in our follow-up email. But whenever an author tells me they want to reach the New York Times list, I feel a little bit worried because while I'd love to see the books that we promote get there, in 5 years we haven't seen one get close, and I think there are other more worthwhile goals to put your energy around. So there's my bias for a minute. It's showing. So I know we want to talk about the next webinar. We're doing these webinars twice a month. Oh, and I'm the one who has to move the slides.
We changed it up today.
Here we go. So the next free Weaving Influence book marketing webinar that we have is scheduled for October 11th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And my colleague, Christy Kirk, who's the Director of Social Digital Strategy here at Weaving Influence, will be here. And she'll have a presentation about social media best practices relating to book marketing. And she'll be open to your questions. So I would encourage you to go ahead and visit our website to sign up for that. And if you've come today and you'd like to find out about next steps, we have 3 recommended next steps for you. One is that we have created the Book Marketing Action Guide, which is designed to help you walk through the 4 phases of book marketing with some very focused approaches that you can implement on your own, particularly if you have a limited budget. And so we would encourage you, as a next step today, you could go and buy the Book Marketing Action Guide. It's priced at $249, and you can find it at weavinginfluencelab.com. If you are looking for additional support in book marketing, you can email me to set up a time to talk. I am Becky at weavinginfluence.com. Another action step or next step could be to share these webinars with a friend or colleague. If you know someone who's working through the priorities of book marketing or could benefit from these, all the archived webinars are recorded, available on YouTube and our website. And as I said, we have twice monthly free marketing webinars coming up, and we would love your help in reaching a wider audience with these events. So thanks.
Thanks, Becky.
Oh, have a great day.
Thanks, you too.